Today, we're tackling two major financial questions that could reshape our guest's entire FIRE journey. One, has she already reached Coast FI? And two, should she keep or sell her house? We will dig into the numbers on both fronts, exploring how her house fits into her Coast FI calculations and helping break down decisions that could dramatically impact her path to financial independence. Hello, and welcome to the BiggerPockets Money Podcast. My name is Mindy Jensen, and with me as always is my Zooming to Fire co-host, Scott Trench.
Thanks, Mindy. Great to be here. Love to get a crystal clear picture into folks' finances and think about the paths to fire. Kristel, speaking of Kristel, thank you for your willingness to share all of your numbers for this episode of Finance Friday. We are so excited to explore your options and unpack your situation today. Welcome to BiggerPockets Money.
Thank you very much. I, as well, am so excited to see what you guys can offer and see what we can come up with.
Me too.
Okay, before we get into all of the numbers, could you give us, the high level 10,000 foot overview of your journey with money to, how we got here today?
Sure. So I am probably like a lot of other folks. I grew up in a big family, one of 6 kids. My parents were definitely money-minded. I would say, looking back now, that they more or less fell to the scarcity mindset, though. So we were super frugal, tracked money, tracked expenses, spent the least amount of money on most items, which I suppose really did help me as I, grew into adulthood. And as soon as, I got married at a young age, married somebody that was a service member, and so got to start kind of my own money story. And that, interestingly, happened, I think, right after Roth IRAs started out. And so I didn't know a lot, but I had learned about specifically this one thing that you could do. And that became my mission, is to save enough so that we could start filling this Roth IRA. So beyond, anything else, I really didn't know a whole lot. I just knew to save money and then to fill this one bucket.
Walk us through, tell us about, how that evolved to, spoiler alert, you are a millionaire, and how did that transpire over the years? And when did you discover FIRE?
I didn't really know what FIRE was. I knew the difference, what we had and what we spent. That was a very simple idea to me. So I would, sock money away in our Roth IRAs, and I would save as much as possible. And it just grew in a savings account. Fast forward, had multiple children, and I just stayed simple. That was something that my parents had done. So it was fill up, this Roth IRA, it was save as much as possible, and it just slowly grew. Fast forward to about 2019, I started to realize that my marriage situation was going to change, and that I really needed to figure out what I had and what I could do with it. So it, started out with just this fascination with listening to the Dave Ramsey podcast. And so coming back to those simple, baby steps. And I felt like, okay, well, I think I'm doing that. And then it slowly, I don't even know how I heard about FIRE, but got involved in some of those podcasts. And then I really felt like, okay, I've got something to work with. I just didn't know what to call it. And now we're here.
Mindy, you want to preview the numbers? Let's look at where here is. So your net worth is $1.32 million, which is something to celebrate. Yay! This is great. You are 46 years old with a net worth of 1.3. Where that money is a little different than what most people have. We've got $422,000 in cash with an asterisk, because we're going to discuss that. $31,000 in a 401k, $320,000 in the Roth IRA, $32,000 in the traditional IRA, and a primary residence worth $764,000 with a $241,000 mortgage against it. So about $500,000 in equity in that house. Your current income is $123,000. This comes from your full-time job. There's some nominal child support and income from investments. Your current expenses are a whopping $4,800 a month. So we're talking $60,000 a year on $120,000 in income. So you're essentially saving half of your income. That's also something that we need to celebrate. And your debts are a whopping $241,000 on your primary residence. You do have an interest rate of 6.5%, which is higher than a lot of our people on this show. However, that's a reality that we're going to be seeing for a while. No rental properties, no pension or life insurance to talk about. So Kristel, what sort of help can Scott and I give you today?
I feel like although I'm in a good position with numbers, it still comes down to I spend quite a bit just to live. And I have this house and it's been, such a blessing for kids, but I've got one child at home and the rest are, basically on their own. And so I have this asset of this beautiful house, but I really only need a couple bedrooms. And so this idea of what do I do with my house? That's a big question. Maybe it has, greater meaning because again, I have about 3 years of kids at home. So what do I want next? What does, life 2.0 look like? I would love to optimize for simple. I would love to optimize for easy. But I don't know really what it would take. What cards do I need to play and at what timeline in order to be able to make those decisions.
When I react to your overall situation, I see $800,000 in our traditional FIRE portfolio, right? The cash, traditional and Roth IRAs with that some of that cash is in private money notes. We are going to hope and assume that all matures, and then the other half of your position is your primary residence. Mm-hmm. And so I think that the logical place to start is because there's a lot of lumpy decisions to make in that portfolio. I guess the logical place to start is if we waved a magic wand and we took this $1.3 million and I handed it to you in cash. Do you have even a first hypothesis or draft of what might feel like a good portfolio in that circumstance?
I am leaning, and this has been kind of a process of the last few years. I have been leaning again towards simple and easy. And so by default, that hasn't, buying real estate seems like an okay idea, but it also comes with a level of work. And if I don't have to, maybe I don't want to. That's what I'm considering more the last year or so.
I don't see there's no reason why you'd have to buy real estate in this portfolio unless you want to, of course. But let's zoom in on the primary residence here. Tell us about this primary residence, and do you want to be living in this in 3 years? What would you do if you sold the place today? Where would you live, or how would you want to live?
This house was such a gift. I have 5 kids. We bought it in 2011. It is about a 5-minute walk from the water, out in the Pacific Northwest. But it's a 5-bedroom house, and now looking at being an empty nester, in the next few years, it makes sense to let someone else buy this, let someone else rent this, and then move on to something else. Whether I want to be a transient kind of, travel, that is still yet to be determined. I am planted here at least for the next 3 years. So I need to plan for whatever the next 3 years may look like. And then beyond that could be something else.
Your mortgage is only $2,180. And you said that rent would be about $2,000 a month if you moved out of the house and moved into a mortgage. So right there, you're not really saving much, but you're releasing $500,000 in equity to invest in other ways if you do sell the house. So I think that selling the house is probably a really good idea. You've been there for a while. Are you sure it's only worth $764,000?
That was looking it up on Zillow just recently. So however folks feel about Zillow, just to give a ballpark range, yeah, I think that's what.
Okay, that's a good ballpark. It's a great place to start. I wouldn't put a lot of rock solid support behind that, but that's a great place to start. And then I would talk to a real estate agent in the area just to get an idea of what your house could sell for, get an idea of the market, and also pop into a rental and see what it would really look like. Is this really where you want to live? Take your child who's still at home with you and take them in there and see if this is where they would really want to live. Because from a monthly spend perspective, that's not going to really save you anything. But from an investment perspective, that could be huge. What does your ideal life look like? If you had this, let's say, poof, you are fire in every sense of the word, fat fi, lean fi, barista fi, whatever you want to call it, what would you spend your days doing?
From my perspective, I was very blessed to be a stay-at-home mom for nearly 18 years. So that's actually what I would love to go back to. So I would love to go back to, tinkering in the house, cooking good meals, volunteering in my community, being able to help with kid events more readily. That would be my FI life, is a lot of aspects of being a stay-at-home mom. It was simple, but it was very fulfilling. So that's what I love so much about the idea of FIRE, is to be able to make value-based decisions.
I mean, that's valid. I don't know if it sounds like you're like, oh, well, it's just this really simple thing. That's a great thing. You're talking to a former stay-at-home mom here. It was wonderful to be able to spend that time with my kids. I really enjoyed it. Do you like your job?
I like aspects of my job.
Okay.
I would love to move to part-time work if I could, or pick, a side gig that would more or less bring in some income while hitting those boxes of fulfillment. I have a couple ideas along that route, but I don't have the time or mental space, I think, to really dump into that.
What is your job?
I work in a civil engineering firm.
And are you an engineer, or what is the work you do there?
I do office management.
Office management. Okay. Does that include being available to pick up the phone when people call?
It is a lot of computer work, and that is what I don't enjoy as much. I really enjoy interactions. I started, again, as a stay-at-home mom, very first job, may go down as my favorite job ever, but I worked in a wellness clinic for the military population and absolutely loved it. I just was making almost poverty level money, and I kept bumping into, I wanted to buy real estate, couldn't buy real estate because I couldn't qualify for anything. So because of a lot of podcasts and the FIRE movement, learning how to advocate for yourself and grow your income, that was a skill that I had to learn quickly, and made a couple shifts in jobs to try and grow my income. And this opportunity to work for a civil engineering firm was fantastic because it did grow my income. It, helped build a lot of these office and management skills that I didn't have. It's led to a lot of contacts and networking and, in the real estate space that I wouldn't have had ordinarily. So it has been, a great gift. I just know that, if you ask me 5 years what I want to do, it's not a full-time job doing office management.
Let me spit out a hypothesis. This is how I think, and you react and tell me what you like and don't like for this. Right?
Okay.
Hypothesis. First hypothesis for you to react to. Look at the situation. One approach I might throw out there is we take the $800,000 in more of a traditional portfolio, the cash or loans that will come due shortly, your retirement accounts, and we build a very traditional retirement portfolio, 60-40 stock bond or the golden ratio portfolio with that, and add surplus dollars that come into our life to that portfolio right there. Maybe it goes up, maybe it goes down, but that's a very defensive, very low correlation portfolio that should be able to spit off 4 to 5%. In most traditional retirement models, that gives you at 5%, 40 grand a year, right? Which is pretty darn close to your number here. The second major component to the question is the housing situation. And in this situation, what I'd be biased to do is I'd be biased to sell this property, collect what I imagine is a reasonable capital gain, and redeploy the money into some kind of light house hack, something easy, something with, maybe another area that you can rent out for portions of the year. I love the idea of a short-term rental in the Pacific Northwest. I'm sure that there's just, if you're right on the beach and you like that, I imagine that there's some places where you could really do, if you put 500 grand on a property, you could really do some damage on whatever remaining mortgage balance you pick up in there and partially supplement your income, obviating the need for any part-time work entirely if you're able to do that smartly in there. There's no consequence for swapping out the mortgage today because mortgage rates are about the same or even lower than your current mortgage. So there's no real reason to stay in the property unless you want that continuity for your child, which doesn't really change our plan because you can just do that same thing in 2 or 3 years at that point, most likely, swapping out property. If you stay in the same area, you're swapping out property that's going to rise or fall with the market anyways in that context. So that's my favorite plan there, is to do some kind of lighthouse hack that just really provides that extra stability and security in there. You could also just sell the property at some point in the future and pile the remaining dollars back into our traditional retirement portfolio if no options presented themselves that were good in that way. And then the last piece is I'd be looking for part-time work that is exactly what you want, and actually applying for those situations over the next 6 to 12 months and seeing what that looks like. Maybe there's a way to do exactly the kind of job. If you write down, here's the job I want to do, would be my ideal. You go and find it. Maybe opportunities present themselves to you and they pay reasonably well. Maybe that's a reality that could come to manifest if you start looking for it in there. So that'd be my first hypothesis for your situation. How does that feel? How does that sit with you?
Yes, I think that is very doable. I do like that you put kind of a timeline of 6 to 12 months to make that happen, socking it away in the market and essentially just, getting that, what is it, 6%? Is that what the golden portfolio is expected?
If Frank Vasquez were here, he would design it around the baseline assumption of a 5% safe withdrawal rate.
Okay.
A lot of people have difficulty with that, and there's an endless debate. Should I withdraw at 3 to 3.5% on the big earn camp, or should I go to the higher end of the range, 4.7 or 5%, like Bill Bagan's research and Frank Vasquez are saying? I think that with the way you're thinking about things, and the way I'm wired, at least, I would probably say, okay, I'm going to mentally say it's a 5%, but I'm not going to count on that entirely. That's why I'm going to have some part-time work to offset that, and why I'd also consider a house hack to give me plenty of buffer in this particular situation. You may not even need to touch it for a while. And there you may get far beyond what you need to do, even with the transition to part-time work, if you make a couple of smart plays or the market cooperates at all over the next couple of years. It could also work against you, which is why making these moves over the course of 6 to 12 months might give you a little bit more padding.
That's helpful. I have been actively looking for properties and tried to put an offer in. Nothing has panned out yet, but I would also say that I'm looking for a deal when I'm purchasing, and I just haven't found that yet in my school district.
Would you still stay in that school district, or would the opportunities exponentially compound if you were out of the school district?
They would. Yes, they would. I would have a greater pool of options if I left the school district. I'm in a rather small town. Yeah.
The challenge here is what to do about the housing situation. So again, you option A, plan A could be whenever kiddo's done with school, you sell the place and you pocket this 500 grand. I'm assuming, most of which is going to be tax free. Is that going to be correct?
It was purchased as a married, both of us, and then I refinanced. So, and now I'm single. So I think that there could be the potential of.
What was the property's value when you purchased it?
$344.
Okay, so you might have a capital gain on this. There is a new tax bill introduced this week. I don't know if it'll be live and kicking by the time we actually release this and post this episode, or if it will be killed. But there's a bill that discusses killing the concept of capital gains on primary residence sales entirely.
Interesting.
But yes, you will have at least some capital gain on this. It may not be consequential to your situation, depending on the income tax bracket you're in the year you sell the property. But that will be a tax move that we'll need to consider in that point. But we still should be able to pocket most of that gain of that $500,000 spread between your asset value and your mortgage balance whenever we sell. The bigger challenge then is if that house hack concept appeals to you, then the bigger challenge will be having an income that you can borrow against for whatever that purchase looks like in the future state. So let's say I'm now biasing towards this plan. Stay in the job or something similar to it for a year or 3 while your kiddo is in this school district. Keep that income. You leverage that to do that next house hack. Hopefully you don't need too much of a mortgage. Maybe there's a property for 500 or in there that allows you to just sell your property, pay it off in cash, and put it all into this new house. Or you're getting a small enough mortgage where it doesn't matter. But if you give up the income, the job, the salary, then you're going to give up the option to take on a mortgage, probably in the several $100,000 range. At the point when you want to transition to housing. And that's going to be the bigger barrier to you than any tax moves in this. So if you decide, hey, I don't really want to do a house hack, I'm not really care about that, I'm going to just put everything into a more traditional styled portfolio, then you could make that move right now and rent until your child is done with school. But if you decide, hey, that's actually something that really appeals to me and would give me a really nice security blanket in here that I would feel good about, then I would want you to preserve the income source through that transition point.
Because I've learned that it's very difficult to get a mortgage if you make very little money.
You don't need a big mortgage, but you may need a mortgage.
Okay.
In this, right? Like I don't think your income would allow you to qualify for an $800,000 house with 20% down, but it would allow you with 70% down at that point. That'll be the thing you have to figure out is, where do I want to really live once my kiddo's out of school? And if you can figure that out and you don't need to buy to make that work, to feel good about that situation, then you can sell at any point, rent for a year or two and make that transition. But if you do decide that, then I think you'd want to burn it for another 3 years and figure out how to keep that job and that income source. So you can make that transition smoothly. For the housing situation, what I would do here is, the first thing you understand is, what is your tax situation going to be like at that future point? You don't have to worry about this for 6 months. So let time pass and see what happens with this bill in Congress. But before you go to sell this house, talk to a CPA at that point in time and figure out, hey, what is my gain going to look like? And my guess is that if you sell this next year or the year after, you're going to have a very negligible tax hit from this sale, even though you will have a gain because of your income and your situation. I believe there's a way to have a very low tax hit from that sale, where you can keep most of that. But you want to confirm that and make sure you don't sell in 1 year where you have a high amount of realized gains or whatever in there. Okay, next, I would come up with a hypothesis for what a good house hack, what that next step looks like. You have years to figure this out, and it's the most consequential decision, I think, in your life and your financial situation. So I'd have a hypothesis. Just draft it, a piece of paper, 1 paragraph, 2 paragraphs. I looked on Zillow or whatever your favorite real estate browsing portal, and these are some of the things that could be really nice. They give me a really good blend of the lifestyle I want, the location, the proximity to the beach, and income generation potential as a short-term Airbnb. I understand this is the area with those really restrictive HOA or Airbnb laws that only allow people like me to short-term rental it portions of the year and give me a huge leg up. Like, put that hypothesis to paper and start looking at some of those on a regular basis, maybe driving past them, but have that as a written document. There's no reason not to. It's the biggest thesis in your situation, most likely. And the last piece is, I'd also do the same exercise that's very simple, half page there, of like, my ideal day of work looks like this on a part-time basis. I show up here. I have these types of conversations with these types of people going through these types of challenges. I leave it at the door at this time, and I'm able to do that. And just start seeing if those opportunities exist out there and keeping an eye out for them. You may find that all of this comes into your life pretty seamlessly over the next 2 years because your situation's pretty good. You got $1.3 million in net worth, all the optionality in the world once your kiddo leaves the house and presumably goes to college or begins adult life in there. And these are all good options. This is a very surmountable challenge, but you can make the most of it by having a concrete plan for what I'm going to do with my portfolio, what I'm going to do with my house, what I'm going to do after that with my housing, and what I want to do for work, and making sure that those are all lined up. You're aware of those opportunities and what's realistic.
Now, if I start, transferring money into, the golden portfolio or whatever it's called, the gains on that, am I just letting that continue to roll?
My belief is that there will be absolutely no tax consequence whatsoever for transitioning your portfolio to a future state portfolio. This may be a place where you want to invest a few, $1,000 to $3,000, talking to a financial planner about specifically what portfolio you want, right? We cannot do that here on BiggerPockets Money. Mindy's portfolio with Frank is only an illustrative example of one version of a golden ratio portfolio on there. But my belief is that if you were to move to a portfolio, even perhaps exactly like what Mindy's is in there, that you should have very little to no tax consequence. All of the money you move inside of your Roth can be transitioned tax-free. There's no tax consequence for a gain or loss as long as it stays in the Roth, right? We're not distributing right now. We'll talk about distribution strategy in a few years, but to move from today's state to that portfolio, there should be no tax consequence. So Roth IRA will have no tax consequence. The 401k and traditional should have no tax consequence for selling or moving funds in there. So that leaves us with the $422,000 in cash. You will pay tax on the interest you receive on each of these three notes that you are invested in. But once the principal is returned to you, there will be no tax for that. So you are free then to invest it however you wish. Then you have 110 in a money market account. If you will pay taxes on the interest you receive in that, but if you transition that or a big chunk of that into the components of this future state portfolio, you will have no tax consequence. As you accumulate dollars, you will probably not harvest this portfolio until you make the final decision with your housing and leave your job. That is when you'll need to harvest the portfolio. At that point, you will have tax considerations to take into account.
I want to reiterate what Scott said. You currently have $31,000 in your 401k. I believe we talked that all of your investment accounts are in VTSAX. So what you would do is sell the VTSAX within the 401k and then move it to a different type of account. A different type of investment. Because you're not taking any money out of the 401k, there's no tax consequence. The same with your Roth IRA. You're just taking from VTSAX and turning it into a different investment vehicle. The things that Frank had me put my account into were gold and bonds and international funds. And a lot of other things. And it's been a minute since I recorded that episode, so I don't actually remember all of the things that he has me in. But you're just taking that 320 that's in your Roth and putting it into a different account. Your accounts are allowed to sell and reinvest in different things. The only time you hit a tax consequence is when you actually take possession of the money yourself. And I just wanted to clarify that. I also wanted to say that one of your questions was, are you Coast FI or Barista FI? And I pulled up a copy of the Pioneers Coast FI calculator and I threw your numbers in. Age 46, retiring at age 65, withdrawing 4% and assuming a 7% growth.
Let's assume lower than that though, right? Because we are not going to be in a high growth, aggressive portfolio, most likely, because the stated goal is to barista fire right away within the next 3 years.
Okay. What would you assume?
Let me think about that actually thoughtfully here, because this is not a portfolio that she's going to be letting grow until retirement. This is a portfolio that she's going to begin harvesting 3 years from now. So her retirement age is 49. not 65. So we can't use those assumptions in that projection, right?
Well, okay. I had a different point, Scott. So you think about what the growth rate should be, but I'm going to continue on with this. So because this is the Coast FI calculator. So current age 46, retirement age 65, withdrawing 4%, assuming a 7% growth rate with $65,000 in annual expenses. We've got a portfolio of 1.625 that she will need at age 65, and she needs $449,000 invested today. And I believe that the Pioneers are encouraging you to invest in the stock market. So 449 in the stock market, I think we've got that. Over here, yes, we do. So, but you want to change your retirement age. Let's move it to 55. You'll still need $883,000, which is, again, you've got it. So let's do age 50. That's in 4 years. You would need 1.2 to grow at 7%. And that, I think, is not quite where you're at, but you have 1.3 total.
Unless I sell my house.
Yes. And if you sell your house, are you Coast FI? I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, you are Coast FI, but not traditionally Coast FI where you're investing only in the stock market.
You are certainly Coast FI, right? If you decided I'm going to keep working, I'm not going to add any more, I'm going to spend everything I get coming in. No question that you're Coast FI. The question is, are you FIRE right now? And I think the answer is you have the constraint of needing to stay in this property or one very much like it for 3 more years. And that is your only blocker to FIRE at this point. Once that constraint is removed, you will be able to FIRE under the current assumptions that we have here. And I think the question then is, do we want to do that with a traditional portfolio, or do we want to have some nice wiggle room and buffer in there? And based on your stated goal of barista FIRE, and there's some part-time work you'd like to do, I just think I'm almost like resetting the problem. Like, let's not do a traditional portfolio. Let's put a bunch of it in there, and let's house hack and do some part-time work, because that should give you the quality of life that you're looking for and a huge surplus relative to what you came in today seeking. If you can pull off those 2 moves reasonably, and you want to do part-time work anyways, so doing a short-term rental will probably have super high ROI in your situation. And will involve a little bit of part-time work, and then you can have the rest of the part-time work how you'd like in there. That was more my hypothesis. So that's why I'm struggling to answer Mindy's question with the calculator, because the calculator is not designed for this purpose.
That's exactly what I wanted you to say, and that's what I was going to say. You are Coast FI based on age 46 and retiring at age 65. You will need $449,000 to retire at age 65. And that's what the Coast FI idea is. So yes, you are, but I don't think that this calculator is right for the scenario that you're trying to create. I do want to encourage everybody to go to the Pioneers and download this calculator, because it's an awesome way to just play around with the numbers. They already did all the projections for you. So all you have to do is enter your numbers in there. It's a super easy calculator to use. Are there any parts of your house you could turn into a rental right now?
I am in a small town that is not super Airbnb friendly. So they actually don't allow it. But because the state of Washington has kind of changed some of the laws, it is becoming more of they're forcing the issue that, density laws, things like that. So I feel like I'm looking for a needle in a haystack of a property in my town that will work. I don't think that I can modify my house easily in such a way to actually build, an ADU or something like that. Yeah, I've tried all sorts of things, talked to, the town permitting to see if I can get around certain laws, restrictions, and it just is not an easy thing with this house.
What it boils down to is you have set yourself up very well for success in almost any scenario. You just have to pick which one sounds the most fun.
Oh, I love that. What sounds the most fun?
How will you have the most fun with your money? If you sell your house, you've got $500,000-ish that's going into, I would assume you want that into a golden ratio portfolio.
Yeah.
500 times 0.05, 25,000 a year that you're you would be able to withdraw.
Okay. And that would be living towards just living, whatever, whether it's a rental or possible house hack at that time.
That's if you take all $500,000 from the sale of your house and put it into the golden butterfly golden ratio portfolio.
Okay.
Again, that comes back to just the basics of your overall situation, right? You got $1.3 million in net worth at a 4% withdrawal rate. That's $52,000 a year. If you convert that to a traditional retiree portfolio at a 5% withdrawal rate, that's $65,000 a year, right? And it's all depending on where your comfort. You could probably justify a little bit of a higher withdrawal rate because you want a part-time work. That's why your situation gives you so much flexibility, is because of your willingness to part-time work. And that flexibility only compounds if you're willing to do something like a light house hack, like some kind of version of that as well to defray that. There's just so many good options. Again, so many good options here and so many ways to go about it. I think that the best thing you can do is say, here's what I'm going to do with my portfolio. Here's what I'm going to do with my housing. Here's what I'm going to do with my work, and make sure that those are written somewhere. Simple exercise. And you can review them. And I think that if you're thinking about those over the next year or two, the obvious answers will present themselves. If nothing appeals in the house hack front, that'll shift you towards the moving everything to the portfolio. Maybe sooner, maybe bringing some freedom into your life a little sooner. If some really good options emerge there where you're like, wow, that's going to provide me so much buffer that I can actually expand what I was thinking about for my lifestyle, that's really appealing. Then you can do, that might move us towards that one and actually have you more comfortable working for another couple of years. I do think that the questions you need to kind of frame with a professional as a follow-up and really get your mind around are the tax consequences of your home sale whenever that comes about. Those will be unaffected by the mortgage payoff here for the most part. Very minor impacts depending on what you do with the mortgage payoff. I think I have a question about income and what your Social Security situation will look like. I think you should go through that with a calculator, but I would imagine some unknowns there about how much Social Security you'll qualify for. And then of course you have to make an assumption about how much you want to assume you'd get of what you're currently on track for, because there's, I think people in the fire community often discount that to at least some degree in there. You'll want to think about health insurance, which I do not see as one of your expenses here. So you want to bump that into your consideration, at least from a bridge perspective. So that'll be, that'll be part of your analysis. But again, if you have all of this conservatism and you're going to part-time work, you're in a great spot for that. But those would be some follow-ups. I'm sure that a couple others will emerge as you continue your research here.
Okay.
How do we do? Was this helpful for you?
This was very helpful. Yes. I think confirming that I almost like a deck of, like playing a card game, I have really good cards. It's just how to and when to play. Yeah. So this was super helpful.
Well, thank you so much. We'd love to kind of hear how things go and what you end up doing in the next year or so.
I would love to.
These big moves are going to be really, really scary. So again, I think this is a great one to talk to with a financial planner. Hey, here's my draft hypothesis and what I want, but you've got a great situation. Here's my starting point. Here's a pretty clear, clearish picture where I want to get to. And then what's the bridge to do that? How do I make sure I do that without making any tax consequences or other errors in there? Those will be the bits and pieces to fill in. And then there's a checklist of other things that we got to, button up around there, like assumptions around Social Security, healthcare, and you have life insurance in here already taken care of. We didn't talk about that, but just make sure those I's and T's are dotted and crossed.
No, that's super helpful.
Yeah, I like the way you frame that. It's a card game and I have really good cards. You have really good cards. All right. Well, Kristel, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for sharing your numbers with us so that we could go through there and see what options you might have available to you. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
We will talk to you soon. Okay, Scott, that was Kristel, and those were her numbers and her specific situation. And I had a lot of fun with this episode today. What did you think?
When we think about a finance Friday, right, there are 4 ingredients, I think, that make go into a good financial plan, right? One is a clear picture of where we're starting. Second is a clear picture of the destination. The third is a bridge to get from where we are to where we want to get to. And the last is what I'll call the checklist, the blocking and tackling, right? Like, do we have our life insurance and our estate plan, all those types of things set up? And we almost never talk about that list because that's not really the reason I think folks want to tune into a Finance Friday. They want to hear about the actual big moves to get there. And almost always the problem we have on Finance Fridays is I'm not exactly sure where I want to get to. And I think, and that's, we spend most of our time unpacking in a situation like this, because if we know where we want to get to, then the steps almost always, in a lot of cases fall right into place, or you can go to a specialist like a CFP or whatever to knock those out. And it's not too difficult. And so I think that's the challenge, is where do we want to get to in all of these situations? And I think what this episode kind of brought to light here is, in a situation like this, and I want to fire and go, we can do it. If those constraints are, I'm willing to do something interesting with my housing and I'm willing to do some part-time work, oh my gosh, the game is so much easier to play in this FIRE world than it is with somebody who's just like, I want to be completely done, right? It gave us so many good options out there. And I think it also highlighted for me that this margin of safety and the ability for more to come into my life is, I think, a really key ingredient. At least for the way I'm wired, and I think a lot of BiggerPockets Money listeners, it's really hard to say, I'm going to spend at this level for the rest of my life, and that's the plan. It's much easier to say, I'm going to have a healthy surplus after I FIRE with just basic part-time work and this one house hack, and things should go probably pretty well. That would allow me to expand far beyond my current spending if I ever want to do so. And I think that's an essential ingredient for most human beings, at least most human beings who are a part of the FIRE community. I think that was, something that's I haven't been able to articulate before today, and before Kristel's, coming on the show and showing us her situation.
Look at that, Kristel. You helped Scott figure something else out too. So thank you again for coming on our show. Scott, you said something that I thought was really interesting. At the very beginning, you said, a good Finance Friday needs 4 ingredients. Number 1 is a clear picture of where we're starting. And what we do for Finance Friday is send a document out to our guests to fill out that is a clear picture of what they want. And we have this available for you too. If you go to BiggerPocketsMoney.com/DIY, you will be prompted to make a copy of the DIY personal financial statement. And this is great if you want to apply to be on the show as a Finance Friday, but also it's great just to give yourself a good snapshot of your entire financial situation and see if maybe you have some questions that you have for Scott and I, and you want to come on as Finance Friday guest, or maybe you just want to see where you're at and look at them in different ways. There's a bunch of tabs along the bottom, but it's a really great, we've been working on this document for a while. It's a really great document to get a good snapshot of your personal financial statement.
Yeah. And it's really hard to do this on your own. It's like, stuff that's so easy for me, or so not easy, but like it seems obvious, or big building blocks, or big chunks of people's portfolios. It's hard for me to do with my own portfolio the same way.
Well, hey, Scott, why don't you go to BiggerPocketsMoney.com/DIY and download this?
I have done that. I talked to you about it. So I'm with this, but it's hard to do that in there. So give yourself a break with this stuff, right? If you don't have a textbook portfolio, or the things aren't falling into place with that, this is hard to do with your own stuff. It's, and maybe it's good to talk to a trusted friend, or family member, or community member, or professional about this stuff, and kind of get those building blocks into place, because this is hard to do in your own situation, even as you gather reps from dozens or hundreds of these on our podcast and others like it about what to do. That may seem obvious to do. It may be easier for you to analyze somebody else's situation than your own in a lot of cases, because it's even that much higher stakes for yourself.
Yes. Well, Scott, if you ever want to do a personal Finance Friday with just you and me, or we can get Carl on here, we'll get you all squared away.
Sounds great.
All right. Should we get out of here?
Let's do it.
That wraps up this episode of the BiggerPockets Money Podcast. He is Scott Trench, and I am Mindy Jensen, saying bye-bye, Dragonfly.